So lately I've been scrolling around YouTube looking at videos related to Dead Ahead, and I could not find a single guide for Dead Ahead's Dreadnought game mode. So aren't people making any? Well, I believe it is due to this game having a built-in tutorial, which I suggest you try out if you still have no knowledge over the game's controls. This tutorial will be talking about every single aspect you need to know about Dead Ahead's Dreadnought game mode. That includes the primary objective of the game mode, the ships and their weaponry, and a lot more. And like always, the timestamps are listed in the description of the video in case you want to fast forward to a certain part you would like to know. Also, all my videos have subtitles, including this one. Feel free to turn them on if you like. Also, in the last video I made quite a lot of mistakes. You can go ahead and skip to the part where I talk about them in the mistakes section of this video. And without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the Dreadnought game mode is considered to be the fun, but overshadowed by a toll game mode. The primary objective is similar to the skirmish game mode, but instead of having to sink all the enemy ships to win, this time, you have to sink the enemy Dreadnought, aka the enemy battleship. It doesn't matter if the enemy still has 1 or 2 destroyer escorts left, as long as you sink the enemy battleship, you'll win the match. Sinking a ship is relatively simple, just cause as much damage onto it. In the Dreadnought game mode, since there are no aircraft, your only sources of damage will be your ship's batteries or the torpedoes from the destroyer escorts. Ships in this game also don't have health indicators, but it isn't that much of a problem since you can tell that a certain part of a ship is heavily damaged if there's visible rust. Okay, so if you've seen the last video, feel free to skip to the ships section of this video, cause from this point I'll be repeating a lot of things I said in the last video. Alright, let's continue. Of course, there are 2 teams, the Iron Fleet and the entire Salamander. Each team is given 3 ships at the start of the game, the battleship and 2 destroyer escorts. They are spawned next to one another and are on the opposite side of the opposing team as well. When the player spawns, the player has a choice to choose which ship to spawn in. This makes switching ships relatively simple by just resetting and spawning on the ship of your choice. Obviously, if a ship is already sunk, the player won't be able to spawn in that specific ship. Now, in the start of each Dreadnought round, each player can vote on what map they want to play on. The one that gets the most votes is the man who will get played. There are a total of 4 maps: Polar, Island, Strait, and Ocean. Polar is a map set at night time where you can traverse your icebergs or use them as cover. Islands is a map with, well, islands which surprisingly you can actually walk on. Same with the icebergs on Polar, however I'm not sure why you want to get on the island. I mean, it's not like you're helping your team in any way by doing so. Just stay on your ships. Strait is basically the same map as islands, except instead of islands it has big rocks. As for Ocean, there are no islands or any obstacles in the way to traverse towards your cover. Instead, the Ocean island is clouded with mist, making finding the enemy ships super hard. When in any of these maps, be sure to use the environment to your advantage to help you achieve victory. Now, before we actually start talking about the ships, we must first talk about the armaments. Now, if you didn't know, the dev from the game gives a detailed explanation for each armament, but I'm gonna try my best to summarize it as simple as possible. First, we have turrets. These are your main sources of damage against enemy ships. There are 3 batteries in the game, but the Dreadnought game mode only includes 2 batteries, that being the battleship battery and the secondary battery. The battleship battery in the Dreadnought game mode is different from the skirmish game mode because both batteries fire 3 shells, but also, the Iron Republic's shells do 9,000 damage while the entire Imperium does 12,000. Both of them fire around 3 rounds per minute, and as for the secondary batteries, they can come in either single, dual mounts, or in the Dreadnought's case, there's even a triple mount. Each of the shells do 1,500 damage and can even cause fires, which can do 50 damage per second if not put out using the fire extinguishers placed on the ships. You can equip the fire extinguisher by just walking close to the fire extinguisher and pressing Q. Now, the controls for the turrets are pretty simple. WASD for traversing the turret, X for turning on vertical aim, R to reset the turrets to its original position, F to fire, Shift to be able to aim slowly, and as for the battleship battery, you can press G to fire spotter shells, which won't do any damage. However, they serve as an indicator of where the shell would land if you were to fire. Again, if you still haven't tried out the input tutorial of the game, please try it out, it'll help a ton. Keep in mind that turrets are also not accurate, so keep all of this in mind when using a turret, because it's pretty obvious by now that if you do not hit your shot, you won't do any damage. Next we have torpedoes, which are basically bombs that travel through water. Their speed is around 150 shots per second and they do a whopping 10,000 damage per torpedo, so you do not want to get hit by a torpedo. Luckily, you still have a chance to dodge the torpedo if you are skillful enough to drive your way out of the torpedo's direction, since when the torpedo is deployed, it will move in only one direction. When you deploy the torpedo, there will be an indicator to show the torpedo's location. The enemy, on the other hand, will only be able to see a trail of water left behind, so be cautious of anything you may see in the water, for it could be a torpedo about to hit your ship and do massive amounts of damage. In the Dreadnought game mode, the destroyers for each team are armed with torpedo launchers which will launch 3 or 4 torpedoes in the direction you are aiming by pressing F. It also takes relatively long to reload, and since it takes some time to reach the enemy ships, you can try leading your shot in the direction the enemy ships are heading towards for their indeed hit. And finally, we have Rangefinders, which weirdly enough are not mentioned in the game's tutorial despite playing quite a large role in the gameplay. So the point of a rangefinder is to find the range for a group of turrets. To use a rangefinder, you must get on the seat mostly located on the bridge of your ship you are on. However, some secondary rangefinders are located where the rangefinders are. Once you are on the rangefinder, you can move your mouse onto the ship you want to find the range of. Then you can click left click to find the range. Once you mark the range, other teammates will be able to see the area you marked, allowing them to easily set the range for their batteries and land a clear shot. Keep in mind that it is best to keep marking the range, since the distance between you and the enemy can change rapidly. Each ship has their own rangefinder, whether it be the main battery rangefinder for their specific ship, or the secondary rangefinder. You can also use your binoculars to zoom in and mark the enemy a lot easier. Also, I would talk about spotlights, but in the Dreadnought game mode they serve little to no purpose. And now that we finally talked about the armaments, we can now talk about the actual ships. Now if you haven't noticed by now, the ships in each team are actually different from one another in terms of looks and weaponry, though the stats balance each other out, so each ship has basically the same firepower. First off, you have the Destroyer Escort, classified in the hull classification system as DD. You might want to remember this because people use this system a whole ton in the game chat. The Destroyer has a health pool of 30,000 hit points. For the Orion Republic, their Destroyer is nicknamed Lambda. Forgive me if I pronounce any of the names wrong. The Lambda is armed with 2 double torpedo launchers and 3 double secondary batteries. As for the entire Imperium, their Destroyer is nicknamed Caerulus. The Destroyer is armed with 3 triple torpedo launchers and 2 secondary batteries. There's also a secondary rangefinder in the bridge of the Destroyer. Also, the Destroyer is the fastest ship in the game and the lowest in health, which makes this ship an obvious glass cannon, which is why this ship is not recommended to be the one tanking all the hits, but instead having a running gun playstyle, due to the torpedoes being able to shoot from far distances. In the Dreadnought game mode, you basically have 3 choices when using this ship. You can stick with your Dreadnought in case it is ever in danger, you can engage the enemy destroyer and pray that your torpedo gunners are on point, or you can try flanking, which is extremely risky because not only are the enemy destroyers most likely flanking as well, but the enemy Dreadnought's guns absolutely decimate the destroyer's health. All it takes is 2 perfect main battery hits and your ship is toast. But all of these options are viable if you have an idea of what you are doing and what you are dealing with. Because while the destroyer may be the ship with the lowest health pool, it still has insane maneuverability and can display a huge amount of firepower. Then we have the Dreadnought, aka the battleship, classified as BB. The Dreadnought has the largest health pool in the game, having a whopping 200,000 hit points. For the Armaments Republic, their Dreadnought is nicknamed Alnitak. The Alnitak is armed with 4 triple battleship batteries, 2 triple secondary batteries, and 10 double secondary batteries. As for the entire Imperium, their Dreadnought is nicknamed Omicron. The Omicron is armed with 3 triple battleship batteries, 3 triple secondary batteries, and 10 double secondary batteries. The Alnitak has 2 secondary rangefinders, while the Omicron has 1. Both ships also have a main rangefinder in the bridge. The Dreadnought on its own can be able to take a ton of damage while being able to display heavy amounts of firepower. But since your goal in Dreadnought is to keep your battleship alive, you shouldn't actively play aggressive, since the Dreadnought is the slowest ship in the game and the largest, which makes dodging multiple enemy torpedoes nearly impossible. But still remember that the Dreadnought is still powerful and it's certainly worth sacrificing 1 or 2 torpedo hits to gain a good position over the enemy. Anyways, in the last video where I talked about the skirmish game mode, I made quite a lot of mistakes, which thankfully you guys pointed out. Alright, so number 1, anti-aircraft guns don't do an ounce of damage onto enemy ships. It's basically the same as mining bedrock. Number 2, the torpedoes for the torpedo bomber do 8,000 damage, while the torpedoes for the torpedo launchers do 10,000 damage each. Number 3, bombs don't do 4,000 damage, they do 15,000 damage. Yikes. And number 4, bombs don't bounce, it's just overall risky to dive at the level than dive bomb. And as for the things I should have mentioned, number 1, the health pools for each ships. I have no idea how I managed to not mention this, but basically, the destroyer has 30,000 health, the cruiser and the aircraft carrier have 60,000 health, and the battleship in the skirmish game mode has 100,000 health. Number 2, kamikazes do 8,000 damage, and scout planes don't do any kamikaze damage at all. Number 3, it's recommended that fighters prioritize taking down enemy fighters first. Number 4, it's recommended that torpedo bombers attack in groups, because not only does a torpedo do relatively low damage on its own, but it's relatively hard for a ship to dodge 2 torpedoes instead of 1. Hence why there are 2 torpedo bomber spawners on the aircraft carrier. And number 5, I'm basically just gonna read this comment. In general, aircraft should stick together and attack one ship at the same time, as this puts a strain on the enemy anti-aircraft gunners, as they need to target multiple aircraft. A well-coordinated aircraft team can decimate enemy ships and survive, as Dead is a cooperation-based game, so teamwork aspects are almost in every aspect of the game, from ships, atoll, and aircraft. Wow, that was a lot of mistakes. Anyways, thanks to everybody who pointed out all the mistakes I made in the video, as you are helping me make better content by doing so. If you managed to find any mistakes in this video, it would be greatly appreciated if you pointed them out in the comments. Congratulations! You practically now know everything about Deadhead's Dreadnought game mode. From the objective, to the ships, to the weaponry. I hope this guide was somewhat helpful to you and fun to watch. If you'd like to see more content made by me, feel free to click subscribe and press the like button. See ya.